How is it going, loyal viewers? Have you subscribed to this channel yet? Surely there are still many who haven't, right? Understandably, this channel is still very fresh. Okay, after yesterday we thoroughly reviewed the movie The First Omen, which reveals the origin of the DAJJAL child born from Margaret's womb. This time we will continue to the life of the boy, Damien, who was raised by his adoptive parents. This time the movie is called The Omen from 2006. Isn't the sequel The Omen 1976? Aights, calm down. Yes, but this 2006 version is a remake of the 1976 version, and the story is almost the same. The difference? The 2006 one is more modern, with clearer visuals and much sharper picture quality. Instead of talking too much, let's just get into the storyline. The story begins in the observatory room of the Vatican City, where a priest is observing a celestial phenomenon, a falling comet. He seems to be seriously scrutinizing the signs that are believed to be harbingers of the coming apocalypse. Another priest then says that humanity's greatest fear is about to come true.
All'alto. Fu data la chiave dell'abisso.
According to their beliefs, when all the signs of the end times have been seen, a figure will appear who will drag people into darkness and misguidance. They believe that this figure is the DAJJAL. Then, the scene switches to a high-ranking American official named Robert. With a tight escort, he rushes to the hospital where his wife is struggling to give birth. Once there, he is greeted by a priest named Spoleto, who tells him that his wife is in a stable condition. However, the bad news: their baby could not be saved. Doctors tried their best, but unfortunately the wife's uterus was severely damaged and she would most likely never be able to conceive again. Devastated and confused, Robert said that his wife really wanted a child. It was her biggest dream. However, the doctor explained that his wife was unaware of this tragic condition. Shortly after, Robert was taken to a special room where newborn babies were cared for. There, a priest suggested that Robert adopt a baby who just happened to have lost both parents in a tragic accident. For those who have seen the previous movie, you will realize that this baby is actually the child of DAJJAL who was born to Margaret in The First Omen. However, Robert, who was filled with curiosity, wanted to make sure first and asked to see the baby's body himself. However, Spoleto seemed evasive, arguing that Robert's baby had been buried by the church. A while later, Robert finally decided to lie to his wife. He said that the baby he brought home was really their biological child. Catherine, his wife, looked very happy, her eyes sparkling with love as she held the baby she had been craving. Time passed. 1 year later, Catherine was seen traveling with Damien to the US Embassy to see Stephen. There, they heard some exciting news. After Stephen left the room, Robert whispered the happy news to his wife. He had just been promoted to Stephen's deputy, and would soon take Stephen's place as ambassador to America. The news made them very happy, especially since it meant that they would soon be moving and settling in London, the same city as the famous soccer star, David Beckham. However, fate had a different story for Stephen. While he was on his way home, his car got stuck in a terrible traffic jam due to a road repair project.
What's going on up there?
Like a scene from a Final Destination movie, at exactly 6 hours 66 minutes, symbolic code, a series of bizarre events began to happen in rapid succession and unexpectedly. In the end, Stephen became the first victim trapped and burnt in his own car. 3 months on from Stephen's tragic death, the story continues as Robert and his family have just arrived in London. Having previously served as deputy ambassador, Robert is finally officially appointed head of the embassy, replacing Stephen, who was tragically killed. Although his heart feels heavy accepting the position, Catherine tries to comfort him by telling him that perhaps this is God's destiny, and that it could be a blessing for Damien, the child they have been lovingly caring for. Yeah! 5 years later, Robert's family was seen throwing a festive birthday party for Damien. It was a lavish affair, like an official's party, complete with grand decorations and important guests. In the midst of the festivities, a suspicious-looking journalist was busy taking pictures of Robert's family, as if he was investigating something hidden. Meanwhile, Damien, who was being held by his new nanny, a beautiful and attractive woman, suddenly fell silent when his eyes fell on a mysterious black dog that appeared from a distance. Damien's gaze is blank, as if hypnotized by the creature's presence. Then, unexpectedly, the party suddenly turns tense when all eyes are drawn to a tragic event. Damien's nanny is found dead after jumping from the top of the building, hanging herself in the middle of the party. While everyone was panicking, Damien was seen approaching the black dog that was now drooling like it had rabies. The boy's gaze was calm, even enjoying the chaos around him. The next day, Robert, who had just arrived at his office, was immediately besieged by reporters asking about the nanny's mysterious death. In a frantic state, Robert accidentally bumped into a journalist named Rusak Robeck, who immediately fell down. Robert only apologized briefly before entering his office. Inside the office, his coworker informed him that there was a guest from Rome who wanted to see him for an important matter. As it turned out, the guest was an old priest named Father Brennenbald, with a thin mustache and a face full of worry. Without further ado, Father Brennan immediately warned Robert that he needed to get rid of his son before it was too late. A confused Robert, of course, thought it was crazy. However, the priest emphasized that Damien was actually the devil's son. Hearing that, Robert was furious and considered Brennan a crazy person trying to get attention. He sent the priest away without believing a word he said. After returning home, Catherine complained that she was too tired to find a new nanny for Damien. But not long after, the doorbell rang. A woman came in and said that she wanted to apply as the new nanny. During the interview, the woman introduced herself as Mrs. Baylock. She claimed to have more than 40 years of experience in childcare. She even confidently said that she used to be Mamang Elon's personal nanny when she was in elementary school. Hearing this, Robert and Catherine were convinced, and immediately accepted her as Damien's new nanny. Shortly after, their little family receives an invitation to attend the grand opening of the newest church in town. However, as soon as they arrived at the venue, Catherine was astonished by Damien's sudden change in demeanor. The boy's face was glum and sullen, and he showed an unusual angry reaction. Damien started throwing violent tantrums, screaming, kicking and struggling like he was in a trance, when his gaze fell on the church building. Due to Damien's increasingly violent behavior, they were forced to cancel their intention to attend the inauguration ceremony and return home. At home, Robert is seen treating a small wound that Catherine got from the chaos earlier. Catherine, now suspicious, suggested calling a pediatrician or perhaps a psychiatrist to check Damien's psychological state. She felt that as he grew older, his behavior became more alarming and strange. Not only that, Catherine realized something odd. Since birth, Damien had never once been sick. He never had a fever, cough, flu, or even a small wound. He was always healthy, no matter what the situation and weather. But Robert just responded casually and said, "That's good, that means we should be grateful. Maybe he is indeed a strong child." Later that night, Catherine is plagued by nightmares that keep her up all night. The dream's content is none other than Damien himself, with a creepy stare that continues to haunt her. Meanwhile, Robert, who hasn't been able to sleep, decides to check the whole house. When he opens the door to Damien's room, he is surprised to see a mysterious black dog inside.
Quiet down.
With a straight face, Mrs. Baylock explains that Damien found the dog while playing outside in the yard. She admitted that she let him in because Damien seemed very happy. Robert, however, didn't like the animal's presence and asked Mrs. Baylock to send it to the animal shelter immediately.
But so did the last one.
The next day, Catherine, Damien, and Mrs. Baylock went to visit the zoo for a short recreation. While looking around, Catherine notices Damien walking alone away from the group. She went straight to him and asked gently if any of his friends might be bothering him or teasing him. But Damien, staring at the cage full of apes and monkeys, only replied briefly, "They're scared." Catherine began to feel depressed and stressed by all that had happened to her family. From nightmares, to Damien's tantrums, to the nanny's strange behavior, all of it slowly erodes her peace of mind as a mother. One day, while Robert was attending an official function, he was approached again by Father Brennan. With a serious face, Brennan invited him to meet privately under an old bridge. The reason sounded urgent. Catherine was in grave danger and could lose her life if Robert continued to ignore the reality. Meanwhile, back at home, Catherine, who is brushing her teeth, has another terrifying nightmare. Still in shock, she hears a strange noise coming from the kitchen. She ventured to check, and it turned out that the sound came from Damien, who was looking for food because he was hungry. But when greeted gently, Damien only turned his head briefly and then just ignored her, as if Catherine was just a stranger in his eyes. The next day, Robert finally met Father Brennan to demand a more reasonable explanation. Without further ado, Brennan advised Robert to immediately travel to the city of Megiddo in Israel. There, he must find a man named Bugenhagen, the only person who knows how to eliminate Damien, who is believed to be the devil's son. Brennan also added one chilling prophecy: Catherine will be pregnant soon, and Damien won't let that happen. He would kill Catherine and the fetus in her womb to maintain his position as an only child. Robert, of course, couldn't believe it, because the doctor had previously stated that it was impossible for Catherine to get pregnant again. But Brennan insisted Robert had little time. He had to act quickly, before it was too late. Brennan seems to realize that his life is on the line after revealing all this. She felt a sense of foreboding coming over her. Frantically, he rushed to the church to seek refuge. However, when he was about to enter, the church door was tightly closed as if locked by an invisible force. Shortly after that, his premonition was proven. A horrific event that seemed preordained happened. Pastor Brennan died mysteriously and horribly, his body brutally crushed as if by a supernatural attack. A few days later, Catherine, who is already very depressed and overwhelmed by all the changes in Damien's attitude, finally asks Mrs. Baylock to take Damien for a walk to improve the boy's mood. Damien's incessant PS2 playing surprised Robert, but his surprise was only heightened when Catherine suddenly showed a very emotional and unusual behavior. In the midst of the chaos, Catherine told Robert in a serious tone that she was pregnant. Hearing the news, Robert is shocked. Father Brennan's prediction about Catherine's pregnancy has actually come true. The tension is heightened when shortly after, Robert's aide sends an emergency message that Father Brennan has been found dead in a very gruesome manner. On the other hand, inside the house, Baylock is seen feeding Damien strawberries. Not a single word comes out of both of their mouths, but they occasionally glance at the auto pet lying on the floor, creating a tense silence. Meanwhile, a weakened Catherine begged Damien for help. but the son of DAJJAL coldly asked, "Are you okay?" As if nothing had happened, even though Catherine was almost unconscious. Moments later, Robert, who had just arrived at the hospital, asked about his wife's condition. The doctor informed him that Catherine had been rescued, but had suffered a concussion and broken bones. Sadly, Catherine's pregnancy could not be sustained, she had miscarried. Robert's grief turned into deep fear. All the things Father Brennan had told him were now coming true. When she saw her husband coming, a scared-to-death Catherine tried to tell Robert that all this time Damien, the child they had cared for and raised, was the son of the devil who was trying to kill her. Catherine's confession made Robert begin to open his mind. He remembered all the strange things that had happened in their house. To confirm everything, he meets Keith, a curious journalist who was previously seen investigating his family. When they met, Keith immediately showed Robert several photos of evidence of the deaths of people around Damien. In the case of the first nanny's death, there was a shadow like a white rope wrapped around the victim's neck. Meanwhile, in the death of Father Brennan, there was a glimpse of white light resembling a spear that cruelly pierced his body. Keith explains that the strange lights aren't just an ordinary camera effect, they seem to show how the victims died unnaturally. After showing the evidence, Keith invites Robert to go to a place that he believes can help them uncover the big truth behind Damien's identity. The deceased Father Brennan turned out to hold many mysteries. Robert went to his room and was surprised to see it filled with pieces of scripture and crosses of various shapes. Among the piles, Robert found an old leaflet containing a prophecy of the coming apocalypse related to the appearance of a comet, exactly 5 years ago, on June 6. Even more surprising, it was on that date that Robert adopted a baby named Damien without knowing his exact origins. Realizing all the strangeness surrounding Damien, Robert decides to investigate the boy's origins. Keith, who also felt his life was now in danger after seeing a white light forming a cross on his neck in one of the photos, decided to investigate with Robert. The journey takes them to Rome, Italy. After gathering some clues, they meet a nun to ask for the location of the church where Damien was born. But the nun explains that the church was destroyed in a fire 5 years ago, a coincidence that seems all too odd. Feeling that time was running out, Robert immediately inquired about the whereabouts of a figure named Father Spoleto, who was believed to know more about Damien's past.
Grazie.
On the way, they took a short break while reading an ancient book containing a prediction of the appearance of the DAJJAL. The book explains that the figure of DAJJAL will be born from among the Jews, but another version from the Romans states that the son of DAJJAL will actually emerge in the middle of politics, because politics is considered the most effective instrument to control the world. To make matters worse, Robert finally realizes that these heretics have been planning for a long time to make him the foster parent of the DAJJAL Damien. After a long journey, they finally arrive at a remote church guarded by a monk named Father Spoleto. This man looked like he had been physically punished by time and fate. His entire body was covered in horrific burns, as if he had been engulfed in hellfire. Wasting no time, Robert immediately asked about Damien's birth mother. After scribbling something down on a piece of paper, Spoleto's assistant informed him that Damien's birth mother had passed away. In fact, her grave is in an old cemetery that is considered cursed by the locals, called Cerveteri. Arriving at an ancient cemetery that is said to be a cursed place, Robert and Keith immediately look for the grave that allegedly belongs to Damien's biological mother. They finally found an old gravestone inscribed with a creepy symbol, 666, a number known as the symbol of the devil. Keith is convinced that this is the grave of Damien's real mother. However, their suspicions grew stronger when they found out that the tomb contained dog bones. With anger and disappointment, Robert realized that he had been lied to all along. The heretical priest Spoleto had apparently faked the death of Damien's biological mother, and even worse, Robert's own biological son had also become a victim of this dark conspiracy.
What if there is?
Shortly afterward, another strange incident occurred. The ground of the grave where they stood suddenly subsided, as if to swallow them alive. Fortunately, Robert and Keith were still able to escape from the disaster even with their breathless and dusty bodies. On the other hand, the scene shifted to the hospital. Baylock, Damien's nanny who turns out to have evil intentions, arrives with flowers, pretending to visit Catherine. Despite being forbidden, the cunning woman manages to persuade and seduce the hospital staff to let her in. However, Baylock's intention is not to visit, but to finish Catherine off. He turned out to be part of the cult that had been protecting Damien. Ruthlessly and without hesitation, Baylock kills Catherine in the hospitalization room. One of the guards is terrified and loses his nerve after being stared at by Damien, who now looks even more sinister.
All done.
Meanwhile, Robert, who is still shaken after the investigation at the cemetery, is resting when he receives a call from his aide. The news he receives is like a bolt of lightning in broad daylight. His wife, Catherine, has passed away. In deep mourning over his wife's death, Robert remembers Brennan's last message to meet a man named Bugenhagen, the only person believed to know how to stop Damien. The man lives in the Palestinian territories, an area currently controlled by armed occupation forces. Determined, Robert and Keith made the perilous journey to the occupied country. Upon arrival, they immediately sought out Bugenhagen's residence. Once they met, Robert told him that Brennan, who had sent him, was now dead. Bugenhagen was not surprised. He knew the time was near, and that Robert was the man Brennan had been referring to all along. Bugenhagen then took them to a special room to show them something very important. There, he showed them various sacred objects, including a set of ancient daggers believed to be able to destroy the body and soul of the son of DAJJAL. To prove who Damien really is, Robert is asked to look for a special mark on the boy's body, the 666 symbol. If the symbol is not visible on his body, then Robert must examine his head. If the mark did exist, then there was no other choice. Damien had to be destroyed in the church, a holy place believed to weaken his evil powers. However, Robert was again plagued by doubts. His feelings were turbulent, his mind was in turmoil. He began to question the truth of all this. Seeing Robert about to leave, Keith quickly took one of the sacred daggers and tried to convince Robert not to back down. Keith was worried that if they didn't act now, Damien would continue to spread terror and claim more victims. However, Robert still refused and even threw the sacred dagger, as if rejecting all the faith that had been built. Upon returning home, Robert saw something that made him flinch. On Damien's head, hidden in his hair, was the 666 symbol. There was no longer any doubt. Now he was sure that the boy was indeed the son of DAJJAL. Full of panic and fear, Robert rushed Damien to the church to end it all. But because he was in a hurry and took a small child by force, Robert was considered a kidnapper. The locals panicked, and the police immediately went after him. As Robert prepared to complete his mission and finish off the son of DAJJAL, a bullet stopped him in his tracks. The police fired without understanding the truth. Robert is dead, and Damien is safe for now. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out on other interesting movie content. See you in the next movie discussion.